The moment I walked into that glass tower in downtown Miami, I knew the whispers weren't about my resume. They were about my clothes. My linen shirt, my simple tote bag, the fact that I didn't look like I belonged there. By the time the interview ended, they had mocked me, humiliated me, and torn my confidence to pieces. What they didn't know was that I wasn't there to get a job. I was there to see who truly deserved to keep theirs. The marble floors of the Miami headquarters gleamed so brightly they almost hurt to look at. Every step echoed like a reminder that this place worshipped appearances. Armani suits, diamond watches, perfect smiles, all moving with the same rehearsed arrogance. I clutched my canvas tote tighter, the same one I'd carried through boardrooms in London and Singapore. But today, no one saw that version of me. Today, I was just Mary, the simple woman in a linen shirt. The receptionist barely looked at me. Her voice was sweet, but her smirk wasn't. "Interviews are through the side entrance," she said, pointing me toward a narrow hallway like I was being escorted out of a luxury store. I nodded and walked, ignoring the way two men in tailored suits snickered under their breath. The hallway was colder, quieter, until I met the other candidates. A group of 5, each dripping with entitlement. One woman, her Gucci skirt almost blinding under the lights, looked me up and down. "Is that your briefcase?" she laughed, nodding toward my tote. Another man, tall and smug, tossed a dollar bill onto the floor. "For your dry cleaning," he said. Their laughter bounced off the glass walls. I didn't pick up the bill. I didn't speak. Years of leading billion-dollar negotiations had taught me the power of silence. I simply looked at him, long enough for his grin to falter. But not long enough to break the act. I was here to see, to test, to expose. When my name was called, I walked into the interview room. 3 panelists waited behind a sleek glass table, their smiles sharp as knives. I greeted them calmly. "Let's begin," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Not yet." Don't end before reaching the required length. Explore her restrained fury, the room's condescension, and how every glance is a test she silently passes. The first question wasn't about my experience. It was about my clothes. "Did no one tell you our company has a dress code?" the HR director asked, his $5,000 suit fitting him like armor. The woman beside him smirked. "You look more like someone who serves coffee than someone who leads teams." I smiled faintly, though my chest tightened. "I believe my resume speaks for itself," I replied. He tossed it aside without opening it. "We'll see about that." They bombarded me with questions designed to break me, each one dripping with sarcasm. When I began explaining a $40 billion merger I'd once led, they cut me off. "That sounds like assistant-level work," one said. Another pulled up a slide showing a photo of a woman in a wrinkled linen shirt, mine, and a red X over it. "This," he said proudly, "is what not to wear." Laughter filled the room. I sat still, every heartbeat a reminder of why I was there. They thought they were in control, but I was studying them, how easily they mocked, how naturally they belittled. Their cruelty wasn't personal. It was cultural. And it was exactly what I'd come to uncover. Then came the final insult. They handed me an impossible test, 10 pages of contradictory data, and demanded I solve it in 5 minutes. As I wrote, the HR director whispered loudly to his colleague, "She won't last 2 minutes in this world." When time was up, I set my pen down calmly. My notes were precise. My breathing steady. The woman grabbed my papers without looking. "You're not a fit," she said flatly. "No presence, no confidence, no leadership potential." I stood slowly, meeting their eyes one last time. "Leadership isn't about presence," I said softly. "It's about integrity." They laughed again. They shouldn't have. The interview room felt colder now, the air thick with arrogance and cheap laughter. As I reached for my tote, the HR director grabbed my test, ripped it clean in half, and tossed it on the floor. "That's what we think of your skills," he said, smirking, his eyes daring me to react. The others chuckled like obedient hyenas. The woman in red lipstick leaned back in her chair and added, "Maybe next time, dress like you actually want the job." The security guard by the door even snickered. For a brief second, I felt my hands tremble. Not from shame, but from restraint. Years ago, I'd built companies from the ground up, led global teams, and rewritten entire financial systems. But here I was, being treated like a nobody. It burned, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I bent down, gathered the shredded pages, and placed them neatly on the table. "Thank you for your time," I said. My voice didn't rise. My dignity didn't crack. As I turned to leave, the woman's voice followed, dripping with venom. "Check her bag before she goes," she said. "Wouldn't be surprised if she's hiding company pens in there." The guard stepped forward. "Open it," he barked, as if I were a criminal. I calmly unzipped my tote, revealing only a notebook and my old copy of The Wealth of Nations. He squinted, then muttered, "Suspicious." Their laughter filled the room again. Outside, the hallway was a blur of stares and whispers. Candidates lined up, smirking as I walked past. One woman, her Gucci perfume choking the air, sneered, "No wonder she failed. Look at her shirt." Another filmed me, whispering to her phone, "This is what happens when you think humility gets you a job in Miami." Every word cut, but every step I took was deliberate. I pressed the elevator button, my reflection staring back, hair slightly undone, eyes sharp with quiet fury. They thought they'd destroyed me. They just exposed themselves. And soon, the world would see exactly who they were. 10 minutes later, everything changed. The elevator doors opened again, but this time, I wasn't alone. Michael, the company's CEO, walked beside me, his steps firm, his expression unreadable. The entire floor froze. The same panel that had mocked me now stood rigid as statues, their fake smiles collapsing into confusion. Michael entered the interview room first, the heavy glass doors swinging wide. "Everyone, remain where you are," he said. His voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need to shout. I followed him in, silent, my tote still slung over my shoulder. The HR director's face turned pale. The woman in red lipstick swallowed hard. Michael stopped in front of me, turned to face the room, and bowed slightly. "Madam Chairwoman," he said, his voice steady. "I apologize for the delay." The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the faint clink of someone's cufflinks trembling. My name, Mary Ellis, chairwoman of the board, hung in the air like thunder. I watched the color drain from their faces, their arrogance crumbling in real time. I removed the badge hidden inside my coat and placed it on the table. "I didn't come here for a job," I said quietly. "I came to evaluate the system I built 10 years ago. The one that promised fairness, integrity, and respect." I looked each of them in the eye. "You failed that system." Michael's expression hardened. "Effective immediately," he said, "this panel is under investigation for misconduct." The woman tried to speak, but her voice broke. We didn't know." I stopped her with a look. "Exactly," I said. "You didn't know who I was, because you never cared to know who anyone was." Outside, the hallway filled with whispers, phones recording, gasps echoing. The same people who had laughed now stared in stunned silence. For once, the laughter was gone. Only respect and fear remained. The silence that followed was heavier than the marble walls around us. I could see the panic rippling through their polished masks, their perfect posture collapsing, their eyes darting from me to Michael like cornered prey. The HR director tried to speak, his voice cracking. "Chairwoman, this is all a misunderstanding," but I raised my hand, and the room fell silent again. "Is it?" I asked, my tone calm but sharp. "Then how do you explain the footage on your internal Slack channels? The messages mocking candidates based on their clothes, their accents, their backgrounds?" My words cut through the air. Michael's assistant, Lucas, entered, projecting screenshots on the glass wall. "Coffee girl crashes interview, no suit, no shot, hire the one who paid." The laughter from earlier turned to gasps. Vanessa, the woman in the red lipstick, covered her mouth, her skin pale. Jared, the smug candidate, tried to slide his phone out of sight, but Lucas caught it, his expression cold. "You posted this, didn't you?" he said. Jared's silence was answer enough. I stepped forward, my voice steady but full of restrained fire. 10 years ago, I built this recruitment system to protect people from exactly this behavior. Merit, ethics, fairness. And you turned it into a marketplace for corruption. I pulled a folder from my tote and laid it on the table. Inside were transaction records, bribes disguised as donations, emails promising promotions for cash. "Mr. Callahan," I said, turning to the HR director. Does this refresh your memory? He stared at the papers as though they were burning. Chairwoman, please. I didn't need to raise my voice. You built a system that rewards greed and punishes integrity. You judged me by my shirt, I said, holding his gaze. Now the world will judge you by your actions. Michael nodded once to security. Effective immediately, he said, you're suspended. All of you. The guards moved in, collecting their badges. No one protested. Even arrogance knows when it's defeated. As they were let out, I caught Jared's eyes one last time. His smirk was gone, replaced by the fear of a man finally seeing his own reflection. Do not close early. Expand on the tension and the fear in their gestures, their attempts to explain, and Mary's unflinching control. By noon, the news had already broken. Altera Miami scandal, CEO bows to hidden chairwoman. The headlines spread like wildfire, each one reshaping the world that had once laughed at me. On social media, the same people who mocked my cheap outfit were now calling me a hero. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt vindicated. Michael and I stood in the boardroom overlooking Biscayne Bay. Outside, the city shimmered, indifferent to the storm unraveling beneath its skyline. They're panicking, he said quietly. Half the managers have already resigned. I nodded, my gaze on the water. Good, I replied. This company needed cleansing, not comfort. That afternoon, I held an emergency meeting. The board, men and women who once cared only for profits, sat stiff, silent, waiting. I placed my tote on the table and said, Altera will not survive if it continues to worship image over integrity. I announced a new policy, blind recruitment. No names, no photos, no bias. Just skill. Just merit. Some resisted, murmuring about reputation, tradition, and investor confidence. I looked at them and said, tradition built the problem. Change will fix it. The room went quiet. For the first time, I saw something new in their eyes, not fear, not arrogance, but respect. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. Who is Mary Ellis? How did no one know? I walked past them calmly, my flats clicking against the marble. The same hallways that once echoed with laughter now carried only silence. Employees stepped aside when I passed, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Recognition. That night, from my apartment balcony overlooking Miami's skyline, I watched the city lights flicker. Michael called. You know, he said softly, they'll tell this story for years. I smiled faintly. Then let them remember it right, I said. That I didn't raise my voice. I didn't seek revenge. I just stood still, and the world adjusted. The following weeks transformed the entire company. What began as a scandal turned into a revolution. My new policy, the Ellis Standard, as the media called it, spread across Miami's corporate scene faster than the gossip that once mocked me. Every hiring manager was now required to evaluate skill before status. Names, photos, and personal data were stripped from resumes. For the first time in Altera's history, people were seen for who they were, not what they wore. I spent my mornings walking the glass corridors that once felt hostile. Employees greeted me with quiet nods, some still unable to meet my eyes, others smiling softly in gratitude. A janitor stopped me one day near the lobby and said, I watched the video, ma'am. You didn't just stand for yourself, you stood for all of us. Her words stayed with me. They mattered more than the news coverage, more than the board's applause. Jared's name vanished from every firm in the city. Vanessa's consulting gigs disappeared overnight, her polished facade shattered by the truth she built her career on denying. As for Callahan, the so-called architect of elitism, his suit and arrogance couldn't save him. His accounts were frozen. His titles revoked. He was finally forced to look at the system he corrupted, and realize it no longer recognized him. During a press conference, I stood before a sea of cameras, my same linen shirt pressed and clean. I didn't need to change it, it had already changed the world for me. We've proven that humility, I said into the microphones, isn't weakness, it's strength. And respect should never be earned by fabric, but by action. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, it was sincere. And that sincerity was everything I'd fought for. When I left the stage, Michael was waiting in the wings. He didn't say much, just smiled and whispered, you didn't just fix the system. You redefined it. I smiled back. No, I said quietly, I just reminded them what fairness looks like. Months later, life had found its rhythm again. The city had moved on, but the echoes of that day in the marble tower never left me. I still carried my tote, the same worn canvas bag that had once been mocked as unprofessional. Now, it sat beside my desk in the corner office overlooking the Atlantic. To me, it was a reminder, power doesn't always come from titles or wealth. Sometimes, it comes from simply refusing to bend. Michael and I often met after hours, sipping coffee as the sun fell over Miami's skyline. Do you ever regret it? He asked once. Coming back, putting yourself through all that? I looked out at the ocean, the reflection of the setting sun catching the glass towers below. No, I said softly. Because if I hadn't walked through that door as nobody, I'd never have shown them what somebody truly looks like. The company thrived under its new culture. Diversity blossomed, innovation soared, and Altera became a symbol of reform. Other corporations followed, some grudgingly, others inspired. The world had shifted, quietly, but permanently. And through it all, I never raised my voice. I never sought revenge. I only stood where others had knelt. That's what people never understood about me. I didn't come to fight a battle, I came to restore balance. They thought they broke me when they laughed at my shirt, my bag, my calm. But those things were my armor. Because real strength doesn't need to scream. It just stands still, until the world finally listens. This is my story of triumph. Do you think I handled it correctly? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments. I can't wait to hear your perspective. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to Memorable Stories and Overcoming, where we share inspiring stories of triumph and justice every single day.